Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Medevac podcast. I'm your host, Christian Myers, and on the other side of the table today is our other host.
How's everybody doing today?
David Reed. Today's episode's a little bit different, so we're actually recording this live, more or less. We're doing a live Instagram stream of this right now, and we're going to be answering some of your guys' questions as they come in live. All right, first one, not a question, but Vietnam vets on the podcast were awesome. Thank you very much, Cody. So we've had two Vietnam vets on the podcast recently, Jesse Herrera and Tom Newman. Fantastic individuals, great stories. And upcoming, we do have a World War II veteran who's going to be joining us here in just a few weeks on September 29th.
Yeah, our first World War II veteran, which is going to be super exciting.
Yeah, so keep an eye out mid-October for that release. I'm assuming second or third week of October that should be going live. All right, here we go. Some questions are coming in. Happy Alive Day to David Reed. Any chances to get more Vietnam, Korea vets? I love hearing their stories, and I feel like not enough decent people are getting their stories. Dang, Cody beat me. Well, yes, on that we do have, exactly just as we said, some World War II veteran coming on here shortly.
Yeah, I think the Vietnam veterans have been an excellent one for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because it just showcases a different aspect of war that we're not used to.
Yeah, and a different breed of person too, right? I mean, David and I volunteered to join the military. A lot of Vietnam veterans didn't have that choice. They didn't have the luxury to go out and volunteer. They were told to go. The same with the World War II veterans. And there was millions of people that were forced to go into a war.
Can you imagine that, though? Is that your life and you're being drafted into it without it being your choice?
I mean, especially if you're not prepared for it, if you're not mentally prepared for it, if you don't have family history of it, and the conditions they were forced into. I mean, if you consider World War I, World War II, like modification from trench warfare into World War II was no joke. I mean, they were just starting to adopt basic tactics, and people were dying en masse. There was no real chance at survival. It was really luck of the draw at the end of the day.
And really just, it didn't matter your skill level at all. You could just be unlucky.
Yep. Here's a good question right here. Are you finding that service members are reaching out to you or others for problem solving or navigating both healthcare or veteran services? Yes. So we get a lot of outreach, guys. We get DMs both on our personal accounts as well on the Medevac podcast accounts, as well as the Medevac podcast email. If you're not familiar, medevacpodcast.com. You can submit some contact requests right on there for suggesting guests for the show, providing comments or feedback, or for navigating some of the healthcare services or veteran services that for guests that we have. So we do speak to a lot of military and support organizations. Obviously, if you've listened to the show before, you'll know that we have a lot of nonprofits on, and they do get an abundance of outreach. So there's a reason that we have these guys on the show, right? We want to showcase exactly what they're doing, the services that they provide, and we want you all to take advantage of that stuff. Mm-hmm. That we're not just doing it for showcasing them and to help fundraising. It is an important aspect. But we really care about what you guys take out of the show and the services that are offered and provided. It's really important that if something sounds interesting to you or sounds applicable to your life, reach out. These people are in their positions to help, provide guidance, financial support, mental health support, and there's an abundance of topics that we've covered.
Yeah, and on top of that, we have people that reach out even just for a little bit of help. They're reaching out because their boyfriend is struggling with PTS, or they're looking for a service dog. We have over 60 guests at this point that are a phenomenal resource for any of our listeners to reach out to us at any point and just get the next step.
Yep.
And find out a direction. And we do a lot of that, is pointing people to the right people that can help them overcome the adversities that they're facing.
Exactly. Next question here. Do you guys have any tentative plans to bring a Coastie on the show? Obviously not DOD, as everyone knows, but being in the redheaded stepchild service, many amazing stories go unheard. Yeah, absolutely. So we have had a couple conversations with some Coast Guard members. I used to work with the Coast Guard MSST team out of San Francisco. Super, super high-speed dudes, we talk a lot of shit on the Coast Guard all the time, puddle pirates as it were. But they are a very important asset to the defense of the United States. And the MSST teams are some of the most well-rounded operators that I've ever had the pleasure of working with. Honestly, as far as like insertion from a helicopter onto a ship, I've never seen someone operate more efficiently than these guys. I'm talking a team of 6 down to fast rope and fast rope cutaway in less than 30 seconds. Like, it's super impressive, the amount of work that they're doing. Yes, we would love to have some Coastie members on board. We would love to have them on the show.
If you guys are interested, shoot us an email.
If you've got some suggestions, please. And for those of you who are just joining now, again, we are doing a live session. We're recording right now. We want to hear some of your questions, comments, concerns. We're here to answer your questions live on the show. A little bit of upcoming information. So myself and David are headed down to Mexico here in just a couple of weeks.
We're going to try out a new therapy program.
Yeah. So if you are not familiar, there is a new veteran support organization, or newer, called VETS. It's Veterans Exploring Treatment Solutions. What these guys do is they provide psychedelic therapy to veterans to assist with PTSD, depression, anxiety, as my phone falls over. Through psychedelic therapy. So their primary methods are through the use of ibogaine, which is it comes from the iboga root. It's a root found in Africa. It's got incredible psychedelic properties, but the medicinal benefits are second to none as far as we know.
They're finding that one treatment can change the course of people's lives, like altogether take out PTSD from their life.
Yeah, depression, anxiety, pretty much all the associating symptoms.
I mean, it's pretty incredible therapy stuff, and I would attribute it to almost 20 years of therapy in just a single day.
Yep. Yeah. So for those of you guys who are not familiar with it, kind of talk about the process a little bit in working with vets so far. So we got in contact with vets a few months ago to submit our packages so we could attend the therapy down in Mexico. It's hosted right over the border of San Diego and Tijuana. There's a great clinic down there called Neurogenesis. The MD who owns and runs the clinic, he's very, very experienced in psychedelic therapies as well as other alternative means therapies, specifically for veterans as well. So they've been running this program for quite a few years down there. It's a 5-day event, so it starts between Monday and Friday. Monday is in between the actual medicinal treatments. They do things like a sweat lodge. You're getting rehydration IVs, yoga, meditation. They're teaching you all these basics around mindfulness and how to be more present at these moments, especially when you're trying to deal with depression and anxiety and all those things. I myself have dealt with that quite a bit in the past, and it's something that I'm looking forward to overcoming here in the next couple short weeks.
Yeah, and I think I'm really looking forward to that program as well, because we have a tendency as high-speed individuals to kind of not take a look at our past. We try to stuff it down or avoid it altogether. And especially with my 12-year anniversary, which I call my Alive Day, it's a really good time to take those moments and dissect the problems that are happening in your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And face that. You got to face it.
You do. And it's hard to do sometimes, especially as the anniversary comes up. It's got to turn up a lot of things for you.
Yeah, for sure. In the past, I struggled obviously with PTS. And as that kind of faded away, as I was able to speak about it and talk to those with similar experiences, it kind of shifted away into what was called seasonal PTS. So I was struggling with just this great depression around the time I was getting injured. And I didn't know what that was until I talked to a therapist about it. And they're like, well, this is a classic example of seasonal PTS.
Interesting.
And I thought that was an interesting concept, right? Yeah. Is that when you have a traumatic experience or an event or whatever happens in your life, that time that rolls around and all those people that are saying, thank you for being, it's great to have you alive and all this stuff, it just brings back those emotions. It comes all flooding back in. And how do you address that? How do you accommodate for all of those emotions?
Yeah. And do you think it's Have you found that ignoring it, say you didn't want to celebrate today.
Yeah.
Do you think that would make things easier if you just didn't acknowledge today at all?
I think so. In a little bit, I think so, because it's easy to ignore things. And we talked about Vietnam vets in the beginning here. And that's the classic example of what happens when you don't bring things up.
Exactly.
If you stuff it down and just ignore it, that bottles up and it will express itself in different ways.
Yeah.
In detrimental ways.
Absolutely. And we found that obviously we have spoken to quite a few different Vietnam vets in the past about coming on the show, and most of them have been incredibly apprehensive to do so. It's been 50 years since Vietnam ended. A lot of these guys never got the opportunity for treatment immediately after service, and they really didn't get the opportunity for treatment until just a few years ago after we started actually identifying what PTSD was with the GWAT generation. And a lot of these guys, sat back and I can't even discuss this. I can't even talk about it. We've got friends and family members who are Vietnam veterans who can't even do simple things like get on board an aircraft anymore to travel across the country. I have a family member who can't do that.
That is a very common thing, especially with combat vets. I do a lot of work with the Robert Irvine Foundation, and I see that a lot is some of these guys will drive across the entire country to go to an event, and you ask why, what's going on? Well, I won't be on a plane anymore.
Yep. And I'm not going to mention which family member it is, but very close family member of mine. He served in Vietnam, 2 combat tours over there. He's got 2 Bronze Stars. He was a combat medic. He saw some shit, some pretty hectic stuff. He lives in California, and his grandchildren live in North Carolina. He visits them twice a year and drives across the entire country to visit them twice a year. It's devastating to see that,
And but it's also that example of avoidant behavior, right? Is if it's tough, if it's challenging, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
And I could tell you, first and foremost, for me to overcome all the challenges that I faced, it was exposure therapy. Just facing those demons down and talking about it eventually took the power away from that story.
Yeah.
And was able to help me work through all that.
Absolutely. Looks like, is that Joe McCann in there asking questions? Joe McCann, you're an amazing human being. Would love to hear the results and if anyone has undergone stellate ganglion blocks as a means to treat PTSD. It's growing as a treatment for PTSD in first responders. Yes, so I have had a stellate ganglion block in 2020. I traveled from California to Maryland to meet with Dr. Sean Mulvaney. He's the guy who kind of commercialized the stellate ganglion block for use with PTSD. I attended that on one of their grants, so it was completely free for me to attend. There are multiple clinics throughout the U.S., including the DoD is now offering them at some active duty bases, and the VA is offering them. What it is a nerve block agent that they put in your neck. It goes into the C3, C4 area, if I'm not mistaken, and it's supposed to reduce the fight or flight instinct as it starts to come up for people with PTSD. For myself, I had a great response for it for about 2 weeks, and the reason being, for myself, I did not have a very good home environment at the time where I was living. I had some pretty severe relationship issues at the time with the person that I was seeing, which completely devolved after coming home. So I got the treatment. I came home to a horrible circumstance, which really set me off again. And I was not able to garner the positive benefits from it. It's really important to have multiple aspects of your life squared away, or make sure you're putting in the same amount of effort into these other aspects of your life to make sure that you are set up for success when you get home. If you're in a really shitty home environment and you go for this treatment and you come right back to that same shitty environment, you're not doing enough for yourself to get over that, right?
Yeah, and I think we talk about this quite often, is just because you're experiencing a challenge that has to do with your past service doesn't mean that you're going to come home and the little things are just going to eat at you less, right? Yeah. It is actually more. And you said a comment the other day is that even if it's positive, if you have a bunch of shit in your backpack and you add that in, that's still just shit being added onto the plate.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's a really good analogy. Putting stuff in your backpack, right? If you've got this big backpack filled to the brim with negative stuff, even if you're throwing positive news on there, that can be anxiety inducing all the same because you've not processed all the other stuff that's looming and sitting on top of you. Dave and I, obviously, we run a business. We work very, very hard running Terra Arma. Over this last year, we were buckling down doing 80, 100-hour work weeks. And even the days that we would get really positive news, it wouldn't feel so positive. It would just feel like more is adding on, right? So being able to work through that and to process these things as they come up is really important. And being diligent about it too, right? Don't sit on it, because the longer you sit on it, the worse it can inevitably get.
And I have to keep bringing it back to the example of some of the Vietnam vets. Is you bottle it up for 60 years and you become a different person because of that. You're holding that burden on your back the entire time. It's going to change who you are in a negative way.
Yeah.
If you're stuffing down those negative emotions, you're going to react negatively.
Yeah, it's important to learn how to process them appropriately. See, we have Andrew Danger Powers, one of our very first guests, good friend of ours, Andrew Powers. He says, in 17 years, I've only ever remembered my live day once. Every other time, I had someone remind me. Andrew, if you're still on live, I'm going to ask you to explain a little bit more. Do you think that it's beneficial for you to forget that? Or do you think that you were able to work through and accept your circumstances? For those of you who don't know, Andrew was blown up in Iraq. He lost an eye, had some other associating injuries. Has since recovered. Still only has one eye, obviously, but he helps people with veteran home loans now. So if you guys are looking for veteran home loans, that's the guy to talk to. We'll see if he answers back. But back to that same question, you do think it's important to address it as it comes up and to expose yourself further.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of exposure therapy. I think that, when you have a sign that says no fireworks out on 4th of July, it's a detriment to you. It's not bragging rights, and that's a sensitive issue for a lot of people. But I think this is a table where we could discuss something like that. And, if these fireworks are giving you such a fuss, go out and watch them. That's what I did. I went to very public places, big crowded areas, football games and baseball games. And man, was I so uncomfortable at first with being with them. I could tell you multiple stories of me just breaking down crying.
In a public place.
In a public place. Yeah. And just have no control of that. And over time, it doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
Over time, that starts chipping away a little bit, and you have access to a side of you that you never knew existed.
It's important. Our next question, how was this podcast born? Truly look forward to it every week. Thank you very much. So for those of you who don't know, David and I have known each other for 17, 18 years now.
It's been a long time. High school.
Yeah, we went to high school together, believe it or not. So we've been...
In California, by the way.
Yeah, in California. We're no longer Californians. We're Texans now.
No, I claim Texas 100%.
So how was the podcast born? So David and I have been on opposite sides of Medevac, right? Obviously, 12 years ago today, Dave was picked up by Medevac helicopter after stepping on an IED, changing the entire course of his life. I remember receiving a phone call from him 2 days later when he was at the hospital in Landstuhl, explaining what had happened to him. And I was a month shy of leaving for basic training to enter an Air Force combat rescue, where I then spent a little over 11 years of my life on the other end of Medevac and combat rescue, picking people up who had the worst days of their lives. So David and I put our heads together when I got out of the Air Force last year. We wanted to discuss Medevac and what it's like to actually live with an amputation or live with 98% of your body burned or missing an eye or an arm, what it's like to actually go through the full recovery process. As well as fill in with stories of rescue and heroic events that have transpired over the course of the last 50 plus years of warfare that we've been in.
But we also decided to do it in a way in almost a locker room style format where we could ask those hard questions that everybody's asking, or everybody thinks at least.
Yeah.
And break down the walls a little bit and make it a comfortable zone where people could tune in and find a different aspect of life.
And find that they're not alone, right? If you guys notice, a lot of our guests, they experience the same things. They experience the same things as myself, as Dave, as a lot of you listening right now. You're not alone in this. And that's one thing that we really wanted to highlight, that your story does matter. And the things that you have experienced, someone else might have experienced something similar that have resulted in the same mindset now. There is a way through it. There is a way past it. And you can grow and evolve from that.
I think it's just very common to feel alone, especially when you go through something challenging, like an injury, where you step on an IED or drive over an IED or get shot or helicopter goes down, whatever the case may be. Motorcycle accidents, we see that so often. And, you compare yourself to others. You see these guys compare themselves to others so often, and it devalues themselves. So they just bottle it up even more. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen that. It's like, well, I'm only missing one leg and this guy's missing all 4 limbs.
Yeah.
I should shut the fuck up and not talk about it.
Not true.
And that is the wrong answer to that. You should be able to talk about your problems because you're not in their shoes, or lack of shoes.
Yeah, or lack thereof. Yeah. You have 2 shoes on today.
You have 2 shoes on today. Yeah. So being able to recognize your own challenges is a huge step to that.
Yeah.
And how hard is it to go up to someone and say, I need help?
Very difficult.
Especially when you've been trained to be tough.
Yeah. And there's another question here. Really glad you guys are doing this. Currently battling PTS myself. The whole whether it's good or bad is just more stuff piling on. That conversation hits home. Well, make sure to reach out to us. If you're not currently speaking to someone, we can provide those resources for you. We can point you in the right direction. We're not going to therapize you ourselves. We're going to point you in the right direction, but make sure you're taking advantage of some of these resources that are available to you, and don't quit. Right? Just like the military instilled in you, just like first responders and any of these jobs that you guys have had, they've instilled that sense of resiliency in you for a reason, or at least tried. Capitalize on that. Fall back to that training that you've had and drive through, right? There's a way out of it and there's a way onto the other side. And
understand that you're not alone. Again, there is so many people, we've seen so many guests come on this show that all have had the same issues. And you've seen some of the stories of these guys.
Yeah.
And girls. We've had some pretty intense ladies on this show as well that struggle with the same thing. Jenna.
The most gangster person we've had on the show so far.
A straight beast. Yeah. But still, when you take that uniform off and you go home, now you're sitting inside your own head with those thoughts.
Yeah.
And being able to recognize that there's people out there that that have the experience, that have done the steps that it takes to overcome that. And it is not overnight. I think that's the biggest thing. Is I get a question all the time, is how long did it take for you to recover fully?
Yeah.
And I tell people that I'm recovering to this day. It's a constant journey, and it takes years.
I think acceptance is the most important part of that, right? Accepting that it's a never-ending battle.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But it does get easier. And before you know it, you look back upon all the time that has passed and you're like, wow, I have come a long way.
Yeah. I mean, consider starting something new, right? If you take on a new hobby or new interest, if you have a current hobby or interest, remember back to when you started and how bad you were at that thing, right? And how far you've come. You have to put in the work on all the same. It's uncomfortable work sometimes. It really is. It's hard to navigate. It's hard to do, but it's especially hard to do alone. If you're not reaching out to someone and if you're not sharing this with your friends or your family or the people who are trained and qualified to teach you how to navigate this stuff, you need to start doing that. Reach out to those people. They're here to help share that burden and help you navigate through it, right? They're here to teach you through it.
What was the amount of nonprofit entities? It's 24,000.
Like 44,000, I think.
44,000 military support organizations, veteran support organizations out there. And there is a load of them that support and get you through some PTS.
Yeah, there are a lot of 44,000 directly catered towards military veterans or public service. So pretty much everyone who listens to this show, there is a resource out there
and
for you.
And there's so many things that people haven't heard of. A couple years ago, I did a speak at Camp Hope.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a facility that it's very structured like the military. You got your kind of like barracks and common rooms that everybody goes in. They take your phone away for 3 months. And you check in there and it's 6 a.m. wake up call. And you talk to all therapists who are combat vets.
Oh, wow.
All the therapists there are combat vets who have experienced that as well. So this is an example of like the last step, right? Yeah. Is if you can't deal with it anymore, you check yourself into this. They don't let you call your family at all for the first couple months. There's like color phases for these. But I mean, these guys, after talking with them, are just baffled by it. They just didn't know it existed. Something like this was there for them.
It sounds like exposure therapy, like at its core.
It is. But it also, what it does is it's interesting is when you're struggling with PTS, you're triggered into an emotion that you experienced in that moment of traumatic injury or traumatic experience. So most of these guys all had that moment in the military. So when you're able to bring them all together and kind of put that environment back into them, it helps them navigate through that even more.
It helps them associate a new feeling with that same environment, right?
Yeah.
And that's what is that, CBT? That's like cognitive behavioral therapy, like 101, right?
Yeah.
Is trying to associate a positive feeling with the same environment that triggers you. Like if you're the type of person who gets triggered in a crowd, big crowd, well, expose yourself to more crowds where you're having positive thoughts and positive interactions, right? So that when you remember crowds or when you start to put yourself back into those positions, you have a positive memory associated with that and a positive emotion associated with that. It helps you to navigate that. And it reminds you that, oh, I don't have to feel this negative feeling. I don't have to feel that way when I'm in this environment.
And I think like an interesting topic that might be difficult for some people to understand is that you can't embrace your experience of PTS. And I think that happens a lot in people. They embrace it and, well, there's going to be loud noises there. I'm not going.
Yeah.
I struggle with PTSD. And when you constantly remind yourself over and over again, you're devaluing yourself and your self-esteem. And that chips at you. And then all of a sudden, you go from being an outspoken, outgoing individual to someone who can't even come out of their house anymore, can't even hop on a plane. So, and that's years of transformation. That doesn't happen just in a week or two.
Yeah,
so it all comes back to the support system that you have around you that can help navigate those waters even more.
Total agreement. For everybody new who's just joining in, ask some questions. What do you want to hear about from me and Dave? Experiences that we've had, or again, today is Dave's Alive Day, so feel free to ask some questions to him, to myself. We are here to answer questions live on the podcast.
Yeah, we're doing something a little bit interesting. I think it's important to engage with the audience, especially our audience. It reaches out to us for help. The other day, last week, I told you about the one at the airport. Joined the military just because of this podcast. But
join the Air Force because of the podcast.
Last I checked, the Air Force is still in the military. No, but we had someone reach out to us that was considering taking their own life. And that's a tricky one to navigate as well. But there's a huge burden for us on the show to make sure that we're staying engaged with our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we legitimately run this podcast so that we can air grievances about what's going on with the military, so we can discuss how to navigate any interpersonal issues, PTSD.
And showcase some pretty amazing resources along the way.
Exactly.
We just had a guest on who talked about financial planning. And transitioning military members come out without any know-how or knowledge in financial literacy.
Yeah, how to manage their own finances.
Yeah.
What gives you the power to stay in difficult situations?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I'm going to let you take this one.
What gives you the power to stay in difficult situations? Mindset. Right away is, I always told people I've only gotten so far because I didn't recognize the option of quitting. They instill that into you very, very young into your military service. And they expose you to situations that you would never face anywhere else.
Yeah.
And this comes back to, people always say, well, you have the red card and they're yelling at me and all this stuff. Well, it's for a reason. It's not because they hate you.
Mm-hmm.
It's because they're trying to build that mental tenacity up so that when you do get in a situation, you're not going to get beat up by it.
Yeah.
You're able to stay cool, calm, and collective. That's a tough one. So power is developed. It's a honed skill. And does that mean you're not terrified? Absolutely not.
Nope, not in the least.
There's terrified as being human, but also recognizing that you have to have trust in your team and that you want to bring them out alive as well. So
and
there's a tremendous amount of pressure into that.
Yeah, and trust in yourself too, right?
Yeah.
To trust yourself, to fall back on your training if it is a situation that requires such. Fall back on your training and fall back on your education to help guide you through those situations.
And I'll say, train harder than you fight. Because when you train your ass off and you go overseas, it should be vacation. You know what I mean?
And on the same point, train yourself mentally, right? One thing that Dave and I take very seriously is interpersonal development. So we read a ridiculous amount of personal development books on how to navigate specific situations, whether it's dealing with other people in business.
Mental blocks.
Yeah, dealing
mindset,
with mental blocks. Yeah.
Frame shifting.
Exactly. Yeah, shifting your perspective, right? Those are really important things. And when we say training, we're not talking about being out at the range and practicing your draw. If you guys have heard the podcast, I don't really give a shit about your draw times anymore. We're not warriors anymore. We are now civilians. So
speak for yourself.
That's not what I need to train anymore. I need to train on how to continually better myself and make sure that I establish, for myself, a position in which I'm comfortable to, start developing a family and start, moving on with my life beyond the military.
Yeah,
the military does not set you up for civilian life very well. In some aspects it does, but mentally, I think it offers a lot of resiliency. They don't teach you a lot of the things you need to know how to interact with other civilians in business, in a civilian career. Those are things that you're forced to learn on your own. And when I say training, I mean taking the initiative to begin learning how to do that, how to apply it in your life, and how to help others with that as well. What books are you guys reading right now? Dave's got a big list.
I do have a big list of books that I'm reading, but I do want to backtrack that a little bit and say that if you're uncomfortable, you're probably on the right track. Right? And 100%. I'll say that again. If you're uncomfortable, you're probably on the right track. That means you're testing yourself. You're pushing yourself, and it's creating a little bit of discomfort, but you're growing from that. And that's how you maintain that power.
Absolutely.
Right? So speaking of power,
48 Laws of Power.
48 Laws of Power. That's a book that I recommend for some. Take it with a grain of salt. But Robert Greene is one of my favorite authors. Yuval Noah Harari as well. He's a great human naturist. So we take these lessons with a grain of salt. Everyone's going to be an extreme view on it, but it's how you incorporate that into your morality and your ethics. So we got a long one here. What's that one, Christian?
I get a lot more out of your podcast with my issues from an MVA, a motor vehicle accident that left me paralyzed. And unfortunately, I wasn't in the military to wreck my body like you did, David. That's what I do have guilt about. You might have to expand a little bit, Cody, but if you're saying that you have guilt about not being able to enter the military, you should not feel guilt about that at all.
Or was it guilt, in that everyone around you has experienced a military injury and you felt lesser because of that? Because I run into that a lot of times too. is people will come up to me and be like, I never did a combat deployment, but I was injured in a motorcycle accident. And funny enough story, and this might help you a little bit, is I had a guy that he wore a shirt at the airport every time he went, not a veteran. And he was an amputee.
Right. Yeah.
And he said, I just got so sick of people coming up to me and saying, thank you for my service and putting me in an awkward position where I'm just like, I never served. And that gets to you mentally.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I understand that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And again, not to diminish your own story, right? If it was a motor vehicle accident that left you paralyzed or with an amputation, those are situations that are unavoidable and out of your control. And learning to deal with that and learning to progress through that and adjust your lifestyle to match that as well. It's still, part of your responsibility, but yeah, definitely do not feel guilt about it in the least.
Yeah, I think that's very important point. Is a very important point.
A thank you from Scotland. I'm a civilian paramedic, and listening to yourselves and your guests has certainly kept me ticking over mentally and physically. Different circle, but able.
I think this comment has come up a couple times. It is so important for civilians to listen to this podcast as well. Not only does it educate you on the various aspects and humanizing the actual individuals who serve and protect this nation, but it also helps extreme examples that you can apply to your life that will help you through your adversities that you face and your challenges. I mean, becoming paralyzed because of a motor vehicle accident has nothing to do with service. You could be paralyzed. That's your new life.
Yep.
And putting people at the table who've experienced stuff like that and can inform you of what it's going to look like. And it's not so bad.
Yeah.
And there is a life to be had still. It's so important.
I think Jason Tabansky is a great.
Jason is a great one.
A great example for you, Cody, because he followed up and he says, guilt that I didn't join, right? Jason Tabansky, if you haven't heard his episode, go on and listen to it. He is one of the most resilient people that I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. I love that guy. So Jason was in the Army. He was a helicopter crew chief. And he is paralyzed from the chest down now. The sternum down. So Jason's paralyzed from the sternum down as a result of a strep virus that had gone from his throat into his spinal cord. He reached his arm up and twisted incorrectly. It ruptured in his spinal cord. And as a result, he is now paralyzed from the spine down. So Cody, I'm going to challenge you and say, in that situation, would you compare what Jason goes through to what Dave's gone through, right? Dave stepped on an IED, resulted in the loss of his leg. Jason was not combat oriented and was not injured as a result of combat. Now, if you compare those two things, they're drastically different and they still apply to your situation, right? It does nothing to compare the two. It only diminishes your own story. So having guilt about that, I think it's misplaced, brother. I truly do. And if you want to talk about this a little bit more beyond, feel free to reach out to myself, to Dave. You know how to get a hold of us here.
If you reach out to us, we will put you in contact with those who have gone through some of those challenges that you're facing right now. And I think that's the important part is, and this has been a topic of discussion, where to start.
Yep.
Where do I start? Who do I ask questions to? And it's just a matter of doing a little bit of outreach and people like us can take care of the rest for you and put those people right in front of you that can answer all those difficult questions that no one else will know unless they've experienced that.
Yeah. Kyle Frazier brings up a good point. I have a disabled placard from breaking my neck and having hardware in my spine from a motorcycle accident. Not when I was in the Marines. People always think I'm combat injured or something. Nope. Again, yeah, that's a great aspect. Somebody who served and post-service was injured. Again, like that same conversation, wearing the shirt, not a veteran, that can be a hard topic and something hard to discuss, especially if people have assumptions about how you were injured, right? I think that's a good reason to have this podcast.
And yeah, it's just a topic that keeps coming up is that guilt of not serving. Guilt of not serving. And you should not be ashamed of that. Everybody has their own paths, their own journeys that they're facing in their life. And there's different routes to serve as well. And I think that this podcast has been done an amazing job in showcasing even those who haven't specifically raise the right hand. Troops Direct, for instance.
Yeah.
He does more for the military than some of the people who have served themselves. You know, so.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, find a niche, find an outlet, find somewhere where you can give back, and that's going to help. For me, giving back and philanthropy has been a huge therapeutic outlet for me. I get to spend a lot of time around guys who are completely injured, some to the point where they can't walk, paralyzed, whatever it is. And getting to spend time with those guys and adopt some of their resiliency techniques has helped me tremendously. Just navigate my own, right? And I'm able-bodied. I can stand up on my own 2 legs, right?
2 feet.
I got 2 feet. I've got 2 shoes on.
2 shoes on.
And there's still things that I have to learn from these guys, and there's things that I can teach to them on the same aspect, right? There's always going to be something that you can instill in someone else, and there's going to be something that they can instill in you as well.
I love a couple of these comments that came in is adapting your practice, your medical practice to some of the topics that we discussed. And I would love for you guys to get a little bit more detailed into that and plug that in on how some of these topics do apply to your patients, because that's an interesting one too. We try our best to not, as Christian says, therapize people. But
we might. But
at the end of the day, that's all it is just walking through our experiences and just hoping that someone hears it and can apply it to their lives.
Yeah.
So that's an incredible compliment to us, is that you incorporate some of this into your practice. So incredible stuff.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Well, guys, we're going to stay on live for just a few more minutes. If you guys do have some more questions, please jam them in here. We're going to be answering those as quickly as possible before we wrap up for the day. And this episode should be going live here in just a few weeks as well.
Yeah, I think that we hit the topic of PTSD quite often.
Yeah,
that is a big topic, and it's something that we will continue to push. Probably number one priority, especially as everything comes to a close a little bit. The war is technically over for us.
Yeah,
but we can't forget those that have served.
Yeah.
And it is so important to remember to thank those people.
It is.
Because they do have a lot of doubt in that, is what they did important? Did it matter? And that puts a whole new plethora of stress on individuals.
Comes down to self-worth, right?
Self-worth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really important topic. But while we're wrapping that up, some comments are coming in. The VA did just release their numbers for the year, and veteran suicide has not gone down, right? So PTSD is still a very, very important topic for us to discuss. The numbers just came out, and it is the second leading cause of veterans under 45 years old. The second leading cause of death is suicide right now. There are resources out there. You have to make the choice to reach out. You have to make the choice to reach out. It's on you. At the end of the day, it is. But that's the only choice that you have to make. Reach out to someone who will take it seriously, who can provide that support for you, or reach out to somebody who can provide a network of resources for you. Do not make that choice, guys. I've had 15 friends to date take their own life. It hurts more every single day. It's not the right choice to make. Make sure you're reaching out to other people. It weighs on me very heavily. Dave, all the same. I know he does as well.
Yeah, and I mean, this, Christian, through the Robert Irvine Foundation, I get inquiries in, a plethora a week, several a week, of those that are considering taking their own lives. And that is a tremendous, tremendous amount of stress to deal with. And know that your words are affecting them. Mm-hmm. And they're holding on to those.
Yeah.
So if you guys are wondering, that's why we keep this show so positive. And all of our fan base is very positive. And we're trying to create a community of those that are willing to serve each other.
Yeah, very much so. There was a podcast you guys had a bit ago with an SF medic that came upon a family that had a free fall on them. Oh, I think Tree fall. Oh, I know who you're talking about. That's Rory Farrell. Yes, if you guys haven't heard that story. Rory Farrell is the founder of Zero Nexus. He was a Special Operations Independent Detached Corpsman, SOIDC. They are badass medics in the Navy. He was in Yosemite, and as he was driving down one of the back roads, he watched a tree fall onto a car that had a mother and a 10-year-old on it inside the car. And he was actually able to extract the 10-year-old, and I think he had to revive the mother on the spot. If you guys haven't heard that story, It's incredible. And if you are transitioning out of the military, Zero Nexus, NEXXUS, is the business that Rory runs, and he helps veterans and transitioning active duty service members navigate the VA disability whole program. He has direct access to the VA service. It's a one-time fee. He doesn't take a portion of your proceeds or a portion of your disability like a lot of these other predatory agencies. Reach out to him, period, because he is one of the most genuine, fun-loving, positive individuals I've ever had the pleasure of meeting.
And
truly.
Extremely talented and knowledgeable.
Yeah, truly, yeah.
And that's what's great too is we've been discussing PTS throughout this episode, but it shouldn't deter those who are thinking about going into the military. They have outstanding programs that they're putting into place, and they're recognizing this as an issue where you could go to your chain of command and you could ask for help, and they provide resources for you.
Yeah, I think it's something that's not taken nearly as seriously in the military, and I think a fear of retribution is the big part. Right. I'm open about my military service. I departed from the Air Force due to PTSD. It was not my choice. I raised my hand because I was experiencing issues. And I had a multitude of friends commit suicide at that point because they were experiencing similar issues. I recognized that, and I knew that that's not the route that I wanted to take. So I raised my hand. As a result, I lost my wings, and I was pushed out of the Air Force because of it. There is the fear of retribution, and I understand that. But your life is far more important than your position within the military.
Great point.
It's true. It's true.
It's a great point. Your 4 years of service is just a glimpse of your life.
Yeah.
You have your whole life to take care of. And I always tell people who are like, yeah, I had a broken ankle and I pushed through basic training. And I'm like, hey, could it have waited a month or two?
Yeah, probably.
Because, I have a buddy, our buddy's brother, who has a ruined leg for the rest of his life because of choice he made in basic training.
Taping up his ankle instead of seeing the doc, right? It is more important for you to continue living than it is for your branch of service to have you in that position.
And understanding that you're as strong as your weakest link.
Yeah.
If you can't perform to the best of your ability, you should recognize that, accept that, and ask for the help you need to get back on both your feet.
Yep. It exists. The resources are out there. Unfortunately, those statistics won't be far off over here either. Unfortunately, a high proportion of my patients are vets, and the push you have on PTSD and recognition is inspiring, and certainly hearing of the accomplishments of some guests, I can genuinely offer positive advice and a glimmer of hope to some ex-troops that I deal with. Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate that.
And Red Power just commented, your own life is the single most important thing you'll ever have. Take care of yourself first. And that reminds me of just the classic example of what we always talk about is oxygen masks.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's really important to put your own oxygen mask on first and then someone else's, right? Dave and I do a lot of philanthropic work where that topic comes up a lot. Like, how are you able to continue giving to people? Well, it's because we took a few years to focus on ourselves first, to get ourselves to the point where we felt comfortable to start being able to help other people, right?
And let's reinforce that.
Yeah.
I took over a decade.
Yeah.
Over a decade of working on that for myself. I mean, I've been in nonprofit work for the past 7 years. But most of my therapy came from that. I exposed myself to so many people, and I realized I was in a world that I wasn't alone.
Yeah. It's important. And I'm sure you learned a lot from the people that you were helping at the same time too, right?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like every time I step on stage, I say something that I like, I should probably apply that to my own life.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean? So I have those moments, those epiphany moments where I'm like, wow, like, I obviously am facing these issues. I need to work on that as well.
Yep.
So hearing your own advice just by talking out loud.
Yeah, I mean, here we're saying things to each other right now on this show where I'm like, damn it, I really need to be better about this shit. I can see our producers nodding their heads like, damn it, I really need to be better about this stuff.
Yeah. And we all need to be better. And I think it's really important to realize that when we say, man, I have to be better at this, you're setting yourself up for a smidge of failure.
You're applying judgment to it.
Because that's it. And I always say this, you're devaluing yourself. Is I need to do this. No, you're exactly where you need to be right now.
Yeah.
But what are you doing to accomplish the goals that you have?
Yeah.
Right? Whatever those goals may be. If I don't want to get the sweats and break down in tears when I'm at IKEA, then I need to work on that. And what are the steps that I need to take to overcome those challenges?
And everyone has this ability. It's something that I talk about a lot, is decoupling the emotional response and an objective view of the issues, right? If you can recognize the issues that you're having and what's bringing those things up, try to decouple the emotions and look at it objectively. Don't apply judgment to it. Like, man, why am I so sad right now? Well, take a step back from yourself and try to analyze the situation. Am I sad for a reason? Or am I depressed for a reason? Am I having anxiety for a reason? Or is this misplaced? And try to navigate and try to set out those steps for yourself. Lay out the steps on how to progress through that. Okay, why am I having so much anxiety right now? Nothing's really going on. Maybe this is misplaced. And taking an objective look at that instead of, man, I'm a little bitch for feeling like this. It's not a good way to look at it, and it's not a way to progress through it. Decouple the emotional view on it, look at it objectively, and you can start to tackle the issues as they start to pop up much easier. That's exactly how I navigate through emotional issues for myself. That's 100% exactly what I do.
You interpret it.
Yeah.
You have to interpret it. And I ask myself the question, does this emotional reaction fit the situation or the environment?
Exactly. Yeah.
With PTS, the fight or flight response is going off, and that is what's going on with the increased heart rate, the shortage of breath. You're getting an emotional response that doesn't fit the environment you're in. So taking a moment to take that deep breath and getting into a habit of how you handle those situations, that 3 deep breaths or one powerful sigh or stepping out of the room, whatever you need to do for you, and saying, is this emotion appropriate?
Yep.
And if it's not, then that's where the work begins.
Yeah. And for anybody listening, like, how did you guys learn all of this stuff? Well, this is what you learn in therapy. For those of you who have never tried going to therapy, tried CBT or ACT therapy or any of the basic ones, any of the ones that the VA offers, they're all completely free of charge for you guys. They are good. They are positive. You will learn stuff. The first half of the entire, maybe the first 6 months, you're going to spend learning these tools. They're going to teach you this skill set on how to analyze the situations, how to map it out. You're not just walking in there like, well, I feel sad today, and they say, don't feel sad.
Yeah,
that's not how it works. If you really have never been, give it a shot. It's really important to have these tool sets, and if not for yourself, I recommend going so that you can help other people navigate that stuff, because you very well may have someone in your life who brings something up, or they might suggest something, or it's like an off-kilter comment, and you're going to identify that real quick and be like, hey, I noticed that, and I know where it's coming from. I think you're misguided here, and I'd like to talk to you about that.
And a tool that you put in your box immediately is stop comparing yourself to other people. That begins there. It is really easy to walk into a VA room with a bunch of vets who have all been hit in some various capacity and sit there silently because they've suffered more than you. And that's not fair. That's not fair to you. It's not fair to them.
And I'll be open about this. The biggest thing the biggest judgment that I applied to myself when I first started attending therapy was I flew rescue, right? The worst thing that ever happened to me happened to someone else, right? having someone else blown up in the back of the helicopter, having dead children in the back of the helicopter die while we're working on them, things like that. It's stressful to go through. Those things didn't happen to me. I wasn't shot, I wasn't blown up, but I witnessed it. And that is the judgment that I applied to myself about it, was the worst thing that ever happened to me happened to someone else that was next to me.
Yeah.
And that's not right. It's not a proper framework, and it's not a proper perception. I was applying judgment to myself for that, and it's something that took a long time for me to overcome and to realize, like, oh, that did happen. It is something that I have to work through because it does affect you in the long run, right?
Yeah, and that's a great point that you bring up, is that PTS is not specific to the military.
No.
It is not specific to them. It is a traumatic experience. That's all. Yeah. If it's a car accident, if it's you falling off a ladder, if it negative affects you to watch someone else fall off a ladder, you could still be going through that post-traumatic stress.
Yep, entirely.
And when you compare yourself to others, you're not able to focus on what's really going on internally.
Mm-hmm.
And you drive a really good point home is watching something happen, and how we're trained to respond to that is rub some dirt on it, toughen up.
Yep.
But the fact of the matter is that these stressful things that are happening in our lives, they're not for the regular human experience. Watching your buddy get blown up or watching your father fall off the ladder, it's not natural and it hurts. And if you're stuffing those feelings down, what do you think's going to happen?
Yeah.
It'll express itself somehow.
It'll fester.
Yeah. That's right.
All right, guys, we'll give it a few more minutes on the live. If you guys have any more questions or topics you guys want to hear about.
Hey, and please, don't feel like you got to lock it down.
Oh, yeah.
Just post-traumatic stress.
Seriously.
You guys have any fun questions, ask them up.
We like happy topics too.
Happy, yeah. Guys kept it dark on us.
Digging deep. I do appreciate the fact that people do feel comfortable asking these questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we want to create, is a safe place where people can open up.
Yeah, and have normal conversations about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You should be able to talk about these things normally. It shouldn't have to be something you're embarrassed about. It shouldn't have to be something that has to happen behind closed doors. I understand there's a level of
stigma.
Yeah, there's a level of comfort, sure. You might want to talk to specific people, or you might want to talk away from a group of people. Sure, I understand that. But being able to address the topics as they exist, there's a great example. Dave and I were at an event about a year ago, and we were speaking on an investment panel. And somebody brought up the word that a guy was trying to get funding for his business that studies cancer research. And there was a PhD there that said, well, maybe you shouldn't say the word cancer when you're pitching, because what if somebody's family member in the audience had cancer, and that's really tough for them? Well, you should be able to talk about cancer if you're researching it to try to eradicate it, right? You should be able to have these open, honest conversations that, yes, veterans are still killing themselves at the same rate. It's a fact. It is. It's a fact. It's collated and quantified in data. You should be able to have an open, honest conversation about it and be able to process through it. You don't necessarily need to talk about your experience open with everyone, but you should feel a little bit more comfortable addressing it with someone at least.
Yeah, be selective for sure. And as Christian mentioned too, if you're in the military, make sure that you have the proper systems in place and the proper leadership there that you can open up to. Because last thing you want to do is be forced out.
Yep.
If you're a struggling pilot or, behind the wheel of anything, that's frowned upon, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it is, because you're not only putting yourself in danger, but you're putting other people in danger as well. Courses of Action says, the guy on the bottom is so handsome.
This guy's a dope-ass shooter, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, if you guys like shooting, check this guy out. He's amazing.
Shoosting. Very good at shoosting.
Yes, tactical shooting. So honestly, we love, I think we're going to do this a little bit more often, is engage with the audience. We'll just come on every few weeks. So we'll make sure that we announce these a little bit more in the future here. But thank you guys so much for opening up to us and asking us some of the difficult questions that you have. And huge amount of compliments from you guys. We really love you.
Yeah, truly, very much. Thank you guys for being open with us as well. If you guys need any resources, have questions, comments, concerns, our inbox is open. You can also reach out. Rest in peace, Neil. Absolutely. Could not agree with that more. Prime example of somebody who may seemingly have their life, everything that they want in life, and still fighting secret battles. Neil Curry of Ready Gunner. Yeah, absolutely. That one weighs heavy on pretty much everyone.
Yeah, it's a rough one, but understand that there is light out there. You just got to find those like-minded individuals, those mentors, those people that have fought the same battles as you, and just attach yourself to them. You'd be surprised at the embrace that you'll get.
Yep. And don't give up. Don't give up, guys. All right. If you guys need to reach us, you know how to find us. Thank you very much for joining us today. All right. We're going to end that live. For everyone who listened on audio or YouTube, if you guys want to see this a little bit more often, leave some comments. Let us know if you enjoyed this style of episode. If not, don't listen to it. I don't know. Because we had fun with it.
We had fun with it. And this was our first trial run on it.
Yeah.
And I think we could really, streamline it a little bit and make this an experience for most people to really have a good time.
Yeah.
So
I think so.
Thank you guys for tuning into this one.
Yep. This has been a special episode of the Medevac podcast. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Goodbye.
Take care.